Voyage, voyage, plus loin que la nuit et le jour.
Hello and welcome to 1 Week, 1 Year, a podcast where we watch and discuss a year of film history every week, starting from 1895, the dawn of cinema. This week is 1904, decade in. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Ellie. I'm a film projectionist, and joining me as always is...
I'm Glenn Covell. I'm a filmmaker.
And the other host. This is...
That made it sound like there's a third one that is missing.
And the other host, Joseph the Ghost. Hello, Joseph. Ooh. Not funny. Anyway. As I said, it's a film history podcast, so you can watch along with us and on YouTube. This is all copyright free, so we have a YouTube playlist with everything that we're going to be talking about this episode. With that being said, how you doing, Glenn? What's up?
I just want to say you should end every joke with either funny or not funny, based on...
That would be appropriate in my life in general, because I make a lot of unfunny jokes. I have a new policy with my partner where I can just like rescind a joke halfway through. Like if I know that it's not going anywhere, you know, I'll just say something.
Abort.
Yeah, I'll just say some nonsense, and then I'll be like, you know what? Actually, never mind. And she'll be like, okay, cool. Do you have any Halloween plans, Glenn? We're recording this on around Halloween, but
right. Ooh, spooky.
Not releasing it for a while, I guess.
Not really. I have like family that are doing Halloween-y things, but I don't really have any like real Halloween plans for a fella such as myself.
It's a bummer. You gonna watch a spooky movie?
I'm probably gonna watch some spooky movies. And Over the Garden Wall. I'm gonna watch that too.
Okay, so here's something that I'm trying to figure out. Is Over the Garden Wall more October vibes or November vibes, you know? Or September. Because, like, it's very autumnal, but I don't know if it's specifically scary, you know?
No, it is Halloween-y. It is spooky and scary and, like, directly referencing Halloween.
Okay.
But it is also a good November thing. It does encompass all of autumn, which Halloween is a big part of that. But It is also like, if it's after Halloween, don't feel like, I can't watch it now.
Yeah. I was realizing that it's probably too late to pick apples, which I feel like...
Maybe not. There might be a few left.
I'm hoping that they haven't been scavenged out of existence.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to... But it may be too late to pick a pumpkin. I don't know.
I don't know. Pumpkin's usually fresh through Halloween, so...
Thank you for the encouragement.
Yeah. Gotta get a pumpkin.
I know. Yeah. How can you not?
It's a little frustrating that we're doing 1904 this week, because I've looked ahead. 1907 has a bunch of spooky Halloween-appropriate films, and this was one of the least spooky years I think we've done.
Yeah. Even Méliès was not in his full spook zone.
No. He's pretty restrained. I mean, and by restrained, I mean, like, in comparison to his other stuff. Right.
Yes. Still fairly zany, but for Méliès, some astoundingly normal stuff, which we'll talk about later. Given that, would you like to tell us the news of the year?
The news, 1904. Henry Ford sets a new automobile land speed record of 91.37 miles per hour. The Great Baltimore Fire destroys over 1,500 buildings in 30 hours. War. A surprising Japanese naval attack on Port Arthur in Manchuria starts the Russo-Japanese War. Puccini's opera Madame Butterfly premieres in Milan. United States Army engineers begin to work on the Panama Canal. The International Federation of Association Football, FIFA, is established. The third modern Olympic Games opens in St. Louis, Missouri, United States, as part of the World's Fair. Marcus Lowe founds the People's Vaudeville Company, later renamed Lowe's Theaters, the oldest American theater chain. Motion picture pioneer Edward Muybridge dies at age 74. The first underground line of the New York City subway opens. English engineer John Ambrose Fleming receives a patent for the thermionic valve, or vacuum tube. The stage play Peter Pan premieres in London.
The end.
Thank you. That's the first time I haven't had the whole thing written out in front of me, so I didn't know exactly when it ended. Well, 1904. It's a year.
Kind of a slow year for movies, it turns out.
Which is made even more painful because, like, we just had 2 banger years, you know?
I think this one definitely suffers in comparison with the last 2.
And those 2 previous years seem to be indicative of great things to come, you know? How we were moving out of an older era and into something more understanding of the craft and something more engaging and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not horrible, but
they're not quite there yet. There's some growing pains. They're still a little bit stuck in the old ways of, like, point a camera at a thing and see what happens.
And we're getting sick of it.
A little bit.
But we have, to start off, probably the most notable movie of this year, unsurprisingly, a Georges Méliès film.
Of course.
And that is The Impossible Voyage, which I would call maybe his most steampunk so far.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's like a lot of his stuff is very steampunky.
Yeah.
Way before that term existed.
But after that term is set in time.
Yeah. It's another wacky sci-fi adventure. But yeah, there's a lot of, like, inventions and gadgets and, like, and vehicles. It's very vehicle heavy.
Yes, which the iconic image from this one is a sun in the style of the Trip to the Moon with a face in it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking before I'd watched it that it was going to be another going to space movie, but that's really only a small part of this.
Right, it combines kind of like space adventure, undersea adventure, it's like all of his other, like, adventure movies kind of rolled up into one almost.
Yeah, I mean, per the description that Méliès sent out to American audiences, like the whole idea is that they want to just kind of go on this grand voyage using every form of transport there is. There's cars, there's dirigibles, and there's submarines, that kind of thing.
Trains, flying trains.
That's true, which is very whimsical.
Yeah.
It has a fairly the structure. I feel like it's kind of midway between Trip to the Moon and what was the one from last week?
Kingdom of the Fairies.
Kingdom of the Fairies, where Kingdom of the Fairies is a lot more based on, like, traversal, and Trip to the Moon is more going to fantastic place and then coming back. But it also starts out with a hall of scientists or just, I don't know, explorers, that kind of thing. Less wizardy this time.
Yeah, but still very much in the same vein of, like, a bunch of I think this is the first time where we've had a bit more gender equality in the I don't know what you'd call it, in the library of knowledge, wherever they're coming from.
You mean? Oh, I see.
It's not only bearded men this time.
Right. We've got wizardry and witchcraft in this one.
Yeah.
Not funny. Some of the people involved in this voyage are Secretary Rattlebrain, Archivist Mole, Vice President Humbug, and Engineer Crazyloff.
Played by Méliès. He gives himself the best name. I wish these names were more incorporated into the films themselves, because he is coming up with all of these great character names.
Yeah.
And they're just on like the brochure for like for the movie.
I mean, I'd have to assume that in the original screenings,
playbill, whatever you call it.
Right. I'd have to assume in the original screenings that maybe this stuff would be more integrated, because maybe they're built for somebody talking alongside them and doing this whole show along with them.
Mm-hmm. That is a good point.
But so there are a lot of ways that the things that we watch on YouTube, if they're silent movies with no score, or if they're silent movies with no person doing a whole audio visual show in front of them, that we're like missing some key component.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe these things were built for something more complex than just watching them silently on YouTube. But
I get the sense that was not the intended viewing experience.
But yeah, I mean, the ones that are more self-contained and the ones that tell their story more visually are the ones that I feel like have stood the test of time a little better.
Yeah, that is a very good point. That definitely the ones that have kind of aged the best are the ones that don't require a specific soundtrack or a sort of like live narration or live pyrotechnics, as apparently a lot of these also did.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But I mean, this was a fun one.
Yeah. It's whimsical. It's got it's 20 minutes long, which his longest one so far, I believe.
Probably.
And so it's just lots of just fun scenes of people from moving from place to place.
Yeah. There are a lot of really cool sets in this one. A lot of like cool like kind of cross section sets.
Yes.
I'm thinking of like the submarine, the train cars.
The train cars were really cool.
That actually reminded me very much of Wes Anderson, specifically Grand Budapest Hotel, which also has a sort of cross section train set.
I mean, I don't remember the train specifically, but like cross sections are all his bag, and we started seeing those a bit more recently, which is this very like reality breaking device. Mm-hmm. But no one does it except for Wes Anderson these days, I think.
I mean, this one specifically, I was like, oh, Wes Anderson loves this movie.
Like, I could see that, yeah.
There's a lot of miniature sets in this one, which is something that Méliès has done before, but they're kind of more integrated into the story in this one. I think other times we've seen sort of like whole kind of short films that are just built out of miniature sets, and this one is like it's got some like wacky slapstick stuff. It's got the miniature sets. It's got a lot of effects like pyrotechnics. It kind of incorporates even more techniques, I think, than he's done even in his last two movies.
Yeah, and some of the backgrounds in this are just beautiful too. Even the warehouse where they're building all of the machines. Yeah. It's got this like very lavish illustration sort of in the background with like moving machinery in the foreground, and the colors on this are really beautiful. Later in the movie, there's some like gorgeous painted wrecked trains on the sun and that kind of thing. Well, very cool. Spoilers for late in the movie.
I also noticed in this one that he started putting copyrighted on the set.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would be the first. Oh, on the physical set?
I think so. I think it's actually built. It looked to me like it was built into the set, but I guess it could have been added after.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't notice that. Is that different from when he puts his little Star Films card in the corner, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's specifically something that was like actually painted onto the set or was just added afterwards. But it's definitely different from because he does usually incorporate his Star Films logo into the film somewhere.
Yeah. Huh. I didn't notice that.
But now it actually says copyrighted on it.
I've noticed that his movies this year, they did have like a different sort of outro card than before. That might be something to do with their new American distribution and all of his problems with copyright infringement and all that.
He's getting wise.
Yeah.
To all of the theft of his work.
I mean, thankfully he's not going so far as Edison did, where he like actually like put one frame copyright card flashes in the middle of shots, which I thought was very obnoxious.
Just watermarks.
Yeah, not even like literally like you would find a subliminal sort of just flash of a copyright Thomas Edison.
Edison.
The basic structure of this movie, by the way, is that as we were saying, there are some adventurers, some 19th century aristocratic adventurers who decide to go on a huge voyage, and then it's their hijinks going from place to place to place. So there's a lot of wide, like you were talking about with the miniatures, there's a lot of wide shots of locomotives and just conveyances of various sorts moving through pulled back landscapes. And they go to the Alps, they go to the sun, the surface of the sun, and they go underwater in a submarine, and then they go back and they have a celebration because that's how
it ends with the parade, because that's that's how every movie ends.
I wonder like how many parades Méliès was throwing in his backyard per year, you know?
I have to imagine at least 5. I don't know.
Yeah, given how many of his movies are lost. At least
who
5 per year.
Who knows how many more parades he did.
The man loves parades.
Yeah. I did very much enjoy this film. I do think it was maybe missing some of the spark of Trip to the Moon and Kingdom of the Fairies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the action was a little less easy to follow. And you don't get swept up in it quite as much. It's very hard to like quantify exactly how that works, but I've been finding that there are some things that I can get swept up in, and some that I can't, even though in a lot of ways they're superficially similar, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on there.
Certainly with this one, I think maybe part of it is it almost feels like it's kind of overloading the bag in a weird metaphor. It's like it is kind of trying to do too much all at once sometimes. It's got enormous cast. There's a huge cast of characters that all look the same. So there's just like a giant crowd kind of moving from scene to scene, and I think it would work a lot better with maybe like three people on screen.
That's true. That's another problem that I've noticed with a lot of movies this year, but movies from this time in general, is that, and this speaks to the visual storytelling again, is that the cameras are usually so far pulled back, and we don't really get close-ups, and the fidelity is so low that oftentimes it's hard to follow like what character is who and where, and like whether it's one character in this scene or another character, not just in this movie, but like because everything's so distant and so hard to see clearly. Sometimes it's a little hard to like tell. Oh, is this the same person from that last scene, or is this a new person?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I was noticing that a lot with the Porter movies, which we'll talk about later.
Our catchphrase.
Yeah. Did you have anything else about this? I mean, the sun's surface was so cool.
Very cool.
No backwards pun intended. It's like, I mean, Méliès loves hellscapes, and so the sun is kind of the perfect hellscape. To the degree that they know they're planning to go to the sun, so they bring. It's almost like this Chekhov's ice container.
Yeah.
You know, you see it at the
Chekhov's
beginning of the
train
movie.
car full of ice.
Yeah, you see it at the beginning of the movie, and you're like, "Oh, I wonder what that means." And then, 16 minutes into this 20-minute movie, they're on the sun, and they're so hot, and so they go inside of the ice train car, and then freeze into a block of ice,
Right.
and then have to get rescued.
Rather than take off their 1900s wool coats that they're wearing everywhere.
That would be undignified.
Yeah.
We can't have that.
Of course, then they all freeze in the train car, and Engineer Crazylov has to light a fire to thaw them out again, which is great fun. That was definitely Méliès' biggest movie from this year. There were a few others I watched. One I don't know if you watched or not, but I want to mention just because my synopsis of it is funny.
Uh-huh.
And that is The Cook in Trouble.
I missed that one.
That one I'll describe it to you right now, which is: a cook is mean to a wizard, so the wizard sends imps to ruin the cook's soup. And if that isn't the most George Méliès plot of a movie, I don't know what is.
That's just so classic Méliès. I need to sit down and watch that just to enjoy it. We're getting all all fancy with all these new movies, and sometimes you just want some imps and a wizard.
There's a surprisingly somber Méliès movie this year.
Yeah, I was shocked by how somber it is.
The Christmas Angel.
Mm-hmm.
Another Christmas movie. That's our the fourth or fifth Christmas movie that we've watched.
It's a big genre
in the history of film. It's already definitely a recurring thing. People love Christmas movies.
I mean, it was olden times. They just liked the small amount of joy that Christmas gave them so much, because their life without ibuprofen or whatever was so terrible and painful.
I think about half of these Christmas movies are very kind of somber, tragic stories too, like this one. That's
true. I mean, this is all kind of post Christmas Carol, where
very Dickensian.
Where there's a lot of sadness at Christmas time.
Yeah,
and that's the case with this one, definitely.
A lot of sadness, cold, poverty.
Yeah, lots of movies of people dying in the street while it's snowing.
Yeah,
too.
That was a big thing back then. Apparently.
They hadn't invented coats yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, unless they're going to the sun. I mean, that is an inherently very dramatic thing to see, of someone dying on the street in the snow. I can't think of the last movie I saw where that happened, but I'm sure every year, if you were to look hard enough, you can find a movie from every year where someone dies in the street in the snow.
There was the death of somebody from Bleak House or whatever, the Dickens one.
Yeah.
Or that might have been 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the basic thing of this movie is it's there's a poor family, and they send their daughter out to go beg for food.
Does not work.
It doesn't work out.
No one gives her food, and then I think she almost dies in the snow, but a good Samaritan saves her and brings her back to the house. And then I think maybe an angel shows up. I don't remember. I watched this a few days ago. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. So well, the first thing is that she's suffering in the snow, and a hobo kind of walks up to her and shows her a little bit of mercy and gives her some bread. But then she kind of collapses again. And so here's the thing that I was going to tell you about this movie, is that there were two endings of this movie. This
is my surprised sound.
Well, this is how much I told you, but there's more. Oh, hello, dog. Oh, hi, doggy. There is a French version and a version for British and American audiences.
Oh.
And the French version is darker.
Of course.
And the American one has a happy ending. So in the French one, she dies in the street, and then she goes up to heaven and is brought to heaven by the Christmas angel. But the Christmas angel has less of a presence in the American one, because in the American one, they're like, no, she can't die. And so some rich family drives up in a car and then saves her and brings her back. And then like an angel just kind of appears because everybody's happy.
Right. I saw that one.
Yeah, that's the only one I could find online. But
Oh,
I was like,
interesting.
I'm not sure. Is this the first time that we've seen like a movie's tone altered for different markets?
Certainly not this blatantly, I don't think.
Yeah.
I'm sure there've been sort of like edits made and things like that, but I don't remember if we've ever really found like proper documentation of like two whole versions of something.
Yeah.
Um,
On the Wikipedia, it was talking about how, or as film historian Elizabeth Ezra has noted, these differences suggest that the American audience's predilection for a happy ending was already well in place by the turn of the century.
Yeah, we should probably start crediting real people instead of Wikipedia says.
We got to be honest and say that that's where we're doing our research. I saw someone on Facebook a couple weeks ago talking about how important primary research is, and I was like, I ain't got the time for that for my history podcast, dog.
Yeah, this isn't really a scholarly examination, I guess. It's
No.
you know.
This is we learn and you listen if you think it's interesting.
Also, like a lot of this information is so hard to come by outside of Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Like whoever has done the research on all of these things, hats off to them because they're doing good work.
I'm sure there are film books that have this kind of thing, but it's like
Yeah.
a lot of the relevant primary research would be in French for this stuff.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to read about what the Americans are doing in Edison, whatever, who cares? And yeah, it's all these ancient documents that are probably in archives somewhere, but I don't know how to look at that stuff.
Yeah.
But speaking of the British, I mean, this movie feels like one of the British movies, like stylistically.
It does. Yeah. It's very unfantastical.
It's unfantastical. It's camera angles that we're not really used to him seeing, or at least compositions that we're not used to seeing.
Right. There's still kind of that, like, kind of wide, pulled back, somewhat theatrical, like, framing that we're used to seeing from Méliès.
Yeah, but we've got like some like deep sets where
Yeah.
a lot of the time his sets are very like they suggest depth with a painting, but like it's just some stuff happening in one plane pretty much in front of the screen. Whereas like I remember there was like a street scene in this one where there were actually like built out sets like going back into the screen, which you don't see from him.
Yeah. That also had a kind of a cool cross section in it too, where there's like the inside and the outside were built as the same set, and they're both on screen at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a lot. It's shot very like non-fantastically, but also fairly realistically.
Yeah.
It looks like some of this could have been on location, but maybe not.
Yeah, I just knowing what I know about how he shot movies, I kind of doubt it. But he would occasionally go off and shoot stuff on location, so I wouldn't put it past him. He did a lot of other movies this year that aren't really that notable. A lot of like trick films.
Yeah, he's continuing to pad out his big stuff with trick films.
Yeah.
And his trick films are getting longer now because that's like more of a thing that can be done, I suppose.
One that did stand out to me was The Terrible Turkish Executioner, which is a heck of a title. It continues his obsession with beheading, which, as we learned, is the first ever special effect. So, beheading is the oldest effect in history.
Oh, you're talking about Mary Queen of Scots.
Yeah, it's the first time anyone did like a effect thing. So
yeah,
beheading is the oldest one in the book. But there's an effect in this one where a guy gets like chopped in half and his torso's on the ground and his legs are walking around, and then his legs walk over to him and he kind of grabs them and like sticks his torso back in the legs, and I genuinely don't know how he did it.
Yes. No, I was going to ask you. Like, that was the main thing about this movie I thought, like, I needed to bring up, was that he got the legs to walk by themselves, and they looked like person legs.
Right.
But it also didn't look like there was some torso that was getting masked off or whatever.
Right? I kept thinking of different ways, especially like ways that we've seen him do effects before. I was like, oh, it's a split screen. It's like the top half of the screen is like a different plate or whatever. But then there's other actors in the same shot that are like crossing behind the legs and like on the same. And I was like, what? How did he do this? This is incredible.
My best guess is like just really solid marionette work.
Maybe, but then like
I don't
also
know.
the guy like sticks himself back on the legs, and I couldn't see like a splice. There was no jump.
It must have been a splice.
It must be. I don't think it could be done any other way, but it's so seamless.
You know he's good at splices.
Yeah, he's very good at it by now. But I was very impressed with the effects in that movie.
Yeah, and the beheading stuff in this movie is pretty fun too. Like there's four guys that are put in a 4-person stocks. And then
a big
guy
oversized
with one
sword.
Yeah, with one fell swoop with his cartoony scimitar, just like swipes them all off at once, throws them in a barrel, and then takes a smoke break, and the heads reanimate themselves and then go back to their bodies and thrash him.
Another classic silent film genre. Somebody gets a thrashing. Yeah, should we use? We mentioned British films. Should we talk about some of those?
Sure.
Some good British films this year. I actually think if not my favorite movie, the movie I had the strongest reaction to was a British film.
Okay.
Directed by Percy Stowe, who I have to do a correction, co-directed Alice in Wonderland from 1903, which I had previously said was
Is that Hepworth?
solely directed by Cecil Hepworth. It was actually co-directed by Cecil Hepworth and Percy Stowe. So, this year, Percy Stowe by himself directed a movie called The Mistletoe Bough? Bough?
The Bow by Stowe. Yeah.
Mistletoe Bough, spelled Bough.
Yeah. Maybe because, like, the way the Brits spell hiccup, maybe that's pronounced buh.
Maybe. I can only imagine Mistletoe Bough is the title of this movie. I'd never heard of it, and I did not see where it was going. There's a big old twist in this movie, it turns out.
Like, if I were drinking something, I would have done a spit take when I went halfway through this movie.
Yeah. Well, did you watch it? So, I could not find anywhere online the full version of the movie. The full version of the movie, I think, is about 10 minutes long.
Oh, wow.
Or 8. I think it's 8 minutes. The only one I could find online is a shortened 3-minute version. Because BFI won't let the people in the US watch the longer one. You can only watch the 3-minute version.
Dude. It's copyright free. Why
Yeah,
would
I know.
You, why would you lock it away from people?
I would think someone would have just taken it and put it on YouTube by now, but apparently not. So the 3-minute version has sort of like new added title cards to explain what happened in between and to sort of give context of the plot of the movie. And it gives you the whole story. It's still an effective movie, even with that on it. But it starts out with a nice wedding happening, and then we learn that the bride wants to play hide and seek.
As you do on a wedding day.
The only 2 films ever do this. This and Ready or Not. The 2 wedding hide and seek death films.
That's true. Wow, that really baffled me. I was like, what in the world is this film going for?
It's an old English ghost story. Don't ask questions.
Okay.
This is apparently like an old, like English ghost story. That has long history. I'm giving away the twist now. The bride goes and hides in a chest and is never found again until title card. Flash forward 30 years.
the sad widower in his house who's never stepped into one of the rooms in his giant house before.
Well, he sees her ghost.
Right.
And that her ghost leads him up to like a tower that he's never been in, and he finds the chest and he opens the chest, and then sort of clutches his mouth in terror, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah. I was so shocked because they're just playing a game of hide and seek, and then they give up, and you think like she'll go like, okay, we're done playing hide and seek, but then it's 30 years later,
right?
And he's a sad old man who lives by himself in his mansion, and in 30 years has never found a carcass in his house.
Yeah. But spooky story for sure.
Yeah.
Logistical leaps notwithstanding. And yeah, like I see the title Mistletoe Bough. I'm like, oh, this is like a nice like mistletoe. Oh, there'll be like smooching and stuff. It'll be like a nice fun. Oh, there's a wedding. This is great. And then yeah, hide and seek. Okay, kind of silly and wacky. And then 30 years later, there's a ghost and a corpse. I'm sure maybe in the longer version, there's a bit less like tonal whiplash.
Maybe there's a bit but more. I like the tonal whiplash.
Me too. And I liked that sort of like the original title card comes up saying 30 years later, which is I was just like, what? It was a very Avengers Endgame-y moment for me.
We'll get to that.
This might be the first movie with a sort of like blank time later title card, a sort of a time jump, as they say in the biz.
Do they?
Yeah,
in like the science fiction biz.
Yeah, it's a time jump. It's like, oh yeah, in like season 4 of The Americans, here's a time jump.
Yeah, could be. It's the first one that I've seen. I mean, people are still kind of figuring out intertitles, and having one, I guess that is pretty significant, actually, now that I think about it. Like that, spanning a huge amount of time with a title card, it's a new relationship with time itself within the medium.
Time. I don't want to steal gags from Comedy Bang Bang.
Little comedy sue us.
The clock keeper says, not funny.
Not funny.
Now we're stealing jokes from John Mulaney.
What else was British? Oh, one thing that I thought was really cool that was British was grand display of Brock's fireworks at the Crystal Palace.
Very cool.
This one is, more of his experimentation, which I think he's one of the most experimental people at this time, with style and technique. And this is like a recorded fireworks display, but tinted and dyed in very extreme colors.
Yeah.
To recreate the fireworks colors, but in this very like hyper real look. It's really cool looking.
Right. It looks almost like a cross between live action and animation, because it's like actual footage of fireworks going off and like things shooting out and sparks, but like different parts of the firework are colored different colors and it's different sparks, and there's like patterns and things that you wouldn't even get with a real fireworks show. It's even more, like you said, it's a heightened reality. It doesn't look like a real fireworks show. It looks like this sort of, I don't know, colorful display of shapes and sparks.
Yeah, it gets kind of abstract in a way.
Yeah.
Because the colors get so blown out that at points it's hard to tell what you're actually looking at, but you're seeing cool colors anyway,
A recommendation for anyone who watches this, I should have recommended it to you before you did. I watched it with Claire de Lune playing under it because I like the Ocean's movies. And I realized that Claire de Lune was published 1905, so it's actually very era appropriate.
Debussy.
Oui. That was fun.
Yeah.
There was an interesting story, I believe, is a British film.
Yes.
If I'm remembering James Williamson's nationality correctly.
Yeah. I believe that is the case, yes.
All right, an interesting story is about a guy reading a very good book. He's just got his head in his book all the time, and he keeps running into things and causing hijinks.
Oh, it's called an interesting story because the book that he's reading is too interesting.
Right. The interesting story is the story within the story.
I thought it was just tooting its own horn about how good the movie itself was.
Well, maybe it's a double meaning. It's like, oh, he's reading an interesting story. Also, the story about him reading the interesting story, pretty interesting.
Yes.
But anyway, so he's always running into stuff and like causing hijinks because he's got his eyes in his book until it escalates to him being run over by a steamroller, and then he has to be reinflated by some bicyclists with their bike pumps in a very Roger Rabbit-y manner.
Yeah.
But I had a good, genuine guffaw at, he's like running into people on the street. He's like, oh, like he's poured his coffee in his hat, like, oh, funny, and then hard cut, there's a steamroller coming at him, an actual, honest to goodness steamroller. And I immediately started laughing. It's such a good reveal of that, where you know exactly where it's going. So then he gets flattened, and then they use bug pumps to inflate him back up. One YouTube video of it, there's usually a bunch of YouTube videos of all of these. One of them labels this as the first slapstick film, which is so absurd. Not even close. But 10 years too late on that one. But, sure.
Yeah, I wonder what the criteria for that. That's Change of Foregoing Productions. They have that like film first playlist that generally I've been trusting, but maybe by some definition this is the first slap.
No way.
Not even.
Sprinkler sprinkled takes a cake. That is that is slapstick to a T.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think so, unless I'm wildly misunderstanding the meaning of slapstick.
Oh no, that wasn't a yeah with a question mark. That was a yeah with an exclamation point.
Oh, okay. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. That one
yeah,
sounds
this one's
right.
Yeah, this one's fun. It's hijinks.
I figured you'd like this one, since what was your favorite movie from a couple years ago was the car exploding one. This kind of reminded me of that a little bit. That's true. Was that also James Williamson?
That was Cecil Hepworth.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if were there any other British films. I think we're gonna have to start. Let's start talking about the Americans pretty soon.
Ugh. Let's keep it in Europe for a second and go to Ferdinand Zecca. And I mean, I don't know actually how much I have to say about this movie, cause like Zecca. So this is a movie called The Strike, or La Grève.
La Grève.
And I think with History of a Crime, I had gotten the idea that Zecca was an edgier person than he actually is.
Yeah.
Because he's very like moralizing, and I mean maybe the 45-minute long Jesus movie should have told me something. But he's very like, alcohol is bad, gambling is bad. Don't be upsetting things by striking, or you'll suffer consequences.
Yeah, I thought while watching this, Ferdinand Zecca's kind of whole thing, his like thesis of like all of his movies is, won't somebody think of the children?
Won't somebody please think of the children?
That is like his guiding philosophy behind all of his movies. And yeah, History of a Crime is definitely like, it does feel kind of edgy. And that streak does not really continue.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say that maybe what we were perceiving in that movie as edginess and as sympathy for the criminal might have been like warnings, you know, like dire, severe warnings. Like, if you descend into alcoholism, then you will become a criminal who robs people,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Rather than like having an empathetic point of view toward.
Yeah. Like, oh, this criminal, he was just
he's got a story too.
He was impoverished. He had an alcohol problem. It definitely seems like Zeka's not super sympathetic towards those things.
He makes some good movies. In other cases, I think this one's kind of messy though.
A little bit. Definitely the ending is very weird. Mm-hmm. So there's like a scene of a strike happening, and then the cops, I guess, shoot a bunch of people who were striking. And then a woman throws a rock and hits the factory manager in the head, and so is like taken away, she's sort of taken away by the crowd, and then the cops come to her house and then arrest her in front of her children.
Yep, and then just the children are trying to go after
her,
and they
push them away. Get out of here.
More of these. I guess this is just what French cops looked like. They looked like Jean Valjean at this time.
I think you're thinking of Jean Valjean is the guy who's stealing bread. You're thinking of...
You're correct.
Of Javert.
Javert. How could I forget? He says, and I'm Javert.
Yeah.
How could I forget his name? It's
literally in the lyrics. And I am Javert. In case you'd forgotten.
Don't forget my name.
And then, in court, her kids kind of come to appeal that, no, the strikers were wrong, and so they let her go. This is purely just from the synopses that I found. Like, her kids kind of come and like just kind of cry, and then they let her go. That's really all that happens on screen.
Yeah.
So without reading the synopsis, I thought they were just like sympathetic because of the crying children. But apparently the intention is that like the kids come to try to appeal to the court as like, no, we were wrong. We apologize for supporting the strike.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Jeez.
But then and so that kind of leads credence to the thought that like Ferdinand Zecca is not sympathetic towards the strikers' cause. But then it ends with this weird, there's a title card then that says The Future, or L'Avenir in French. And there's a guy in overalls working with some like blacksmith tools, and then there's a kind of a bearded, besuited man who opens a safe and just pours a bunch of money on the ground. Like, check this out. And then the worker kind of lays all his tools on top of the money, and then an angel appears with a
it's like it's the scales of justice.
With scales.
It's like the personified justice.
And so the worker puts a tool on the scale, and then the money man puts his money on the scale. I guess to imply that like in the future these things will balance each other out.
I guess this ending was a little baffling to me.
Yeah, me too. I had to watch it a few times to really try to understand what he was going for.
Like, why is he pouring the money on the ground? Why? Yeah, I mean, I guess...
I feel like they're both, like, giving up their thing. They're both, like, shedding themselves of, like, the thing that they're associated with, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
I'm probably giving this more thought than it deserves.
I mean, maybe this isn't, like, such an anti-striker movie as a, like, why can't we all get along movie.
I think that's the intention. I don't really think that his real intention is, like, people who strike are bad.
Yeah.
I think his intent is much more sort of like, there's this conflict happening, and there needs to be a better balance.
This is a time, as we've learned from our news segments, of a lot of worker unrest.
Yeah.
I would say
probably because of all of the exploitation of them happening.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe by definition, or by necessity, these movies are being made by rich people, and so they probably have some empathy toward the capitalist class. But this is a time that all that kind of stuff is getting thought about, and I guess Zeka's perspective is la 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 la. don't, please. I like the status quo. Please stop saying things.
Yeah. I mean, I do appreciate Ferdinand Zeka's like attempts at he's making movies about things. Like he is trying to like put real sort of like social commentary into his movies.
That's true. Oh, you know what? I just remembered. I was just going over that last scene again on YouTube, and I just got a recommendation for our earliest Zeka movie we talked about, which was a little more lurid, which was the Through the Keyhole.
Oh yeah.
Which is not very moralizing, really.
No.
It stars a very like a very morally suspect character.
Right. It's instead it's in the other silent film genre of a perv does a pervy thing and gets a thrashing.
We need to just come up with a solid list of early film keywords,
Yeah. It's like
early tropes.
Yeah, it's serpentine dance.
Yeah.
Thrashing.
Yep.
Ghosts, imps. Teleports.
Scamps.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of scamps. Trains.
Decapitations.
It's so weird how like there's these very specific things that everyone just latches onto.
Because they all are just ripping each other off constantly.
It's very true.
It gives me so much respect to the people who are coming up with original ideas because it's so much get people ripping each other off. I mean, one like actually just light trick film that was just fun that Zeka made was the floating bicycle one.
Right.
Which is just fun, and it's very inventive, and then got promptly ripped off by Edwin S. Porter.
Speaking of Edwin S. Porter, he made a very I felt Zeka-esque movie this year.
Which one are you talking about? You're talking about the
Ex-Convict.
The
Ex-Convict, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised that this movie like was talking about issues that are still kind of relevant contemporarily. Although I would say that this might not be Zeka-like because this actually does have empathy for the situation of a criminal,
right? But I think just it reminded me, I think particularly of History of a Crime, in that it is about like a thing, like an issue, like a social issue.
Yeah. The issue in this one is how hard life is for ex-convicts.
Yeah. Which, I was surprised too at sort of how sympathetic it was also. Like, particularly we think of like old movies as being very kind of morally black and white. Also, I think like cops, robbers, hey, it's the bad guy.
Right.
Whereas this is like a pretty sobering portrait of an ex-convict getting the short end of the stick because of his past.
He gets rejected for jobs.
Well, I don't think it was even. I think he had a job, and like a cop recognized him and like ratted him out to his employer. That was my takeaway from it.
That could be. Yeah, I was thinking specifically of that scene where he was trying to get a new job and he goes up and all the men in front of him get led into the factory, and then they turn him around.
Right. No, I forgot about that scene. That is definitely like everyone else gets a job, and they're like, not you.
Yeah. And like, he's like starving in the street and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't even talk about what he did. I don't think
it ever once gives any indication about what he was in prison for. No.
It just says he was an ex-convict.
Well, it says there's
Here's-
a title card that comes up saying, "This man is an ex-convict."
This kind of speaks to the like inconsistency in the title card usage, because like a lot of the title cards in this movie were phrased as if someone were speaking them, but they were actually just kind of like the setup, or they were the synopsis of the scene that you're about to watch. So it's like you're trying to like interpret the whole time what the exact meaning of the title card is, which they're supposed to help you. So
That one in particular, though, the one that says "This is an ex-convict," kind of stuck out to me, in that it felt like it is kind of like more conversational and more like directly addressing the audience.
yeah.
Whereas most,
even then later title cards typically wouldn't be.
yeah, more they're usually they are just kind of like a title of a scene or like a description of a scene.
Yeah, or dialogue.
Although we haven't really gotten much dialogue title cards yet.
Not much, though. I mean, I think that's generally how they'd be used
Intertitles.
later.
Yeah, that's sort of definitely my association with them in silent film is as dialogue. But I don't know if that's ever actually happened yet.
I think it has. Just a little bit, though. I can't remember what, though. Well, so he's out in the street, and he sees a kid that's about to get hit by a car. And so he saves the kid, and, you know, good job, pat on the head to you, ex-convict. But he continues to live a garbagey, bad life after he saves the kid. And then he's in such dire straits and recidivism, because this movie's about things.
Ooh, what a word that is.
He's in such dire straits that he goes and tries to steal from a house, to survive, and it turns out and he gets caught by the people in the house, and it turns out that it is the house of the family of the kid that he saved.
The very family of
And
the kid
so
that he saved.
the very family.
Stop. We have to stop ripping off Comedy Bang Bang. I wanted to say it in that voice, but I restrained myself.
Well, that's what I'm here for. And so it's sort of like they show some sympathy and they help him out afterward, and like happily ever after, kind of.
Yeah. This movie, like all of Edwin S. Porter's movies, is a little long-winded.
Yeah.
A little too long. But it definitely, I feel like this one stuck out as like he is honing his storytelling skills. He's getting better. At least in this one he is. In this one.
I mean, he's honing his storytelling skills, sure, but like The Great Train Robbery has storytelling skills 3 times as good as this.
True.
So
because he had help.
I think this year is just everybody like slacking, as far as I'm concerned.
It feels like an off year for pretty much everybody.
Yeah, like Méliès, Zecca, Porter, to whatever degree that he's actually good. He's worse this year.
Oh boy.
What else can we talk about? Another Porter film? Would you like to?
Sure. There's one photographing a female cook, which is not much of a film.
Crook, right?
Crook. Yes, not cook. Yeah, she is a crook.
Yeah.
Another convict related movie.
Yeah.
This one kind of feels like it's mostly just Edwin S. Porter kind of butting into George Albert Smith's subgenre of people making silly faces.
I mean, that's not exclusively a George Albert Smith thing. I mean, that was like the facial genre from like the early Edison days kind of was in there too. It's just we didn't really want to pay attention to those movies because they're boring. It's just people making funny faces.
But as I don't know if this is actually a first, but it's certainly the first time I think I've noticed it, which is a proper dolly shot, which is to say the camera physically moving forward into a close-up.
Oh, huh. Well, I mean, I guess it's been used for an effect before.
Right, but it's never just been. It's always been to try to make something appear as if it's getting larger. It's never been like the camera's moving closer to a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit probably maybe a bit pedantic to call this the first dolly shot. But certainly in its usage, it feels like the first proper dolly shot. Mm-hmm. Huge if true is what I wrote.
Important if true. Another podcast that we'd love to rip off. What else would you like
name
to talk
dropping
about?
all the other podcasts that we listen to. We could talk about European Rescuer, because why not?
Okay.
Another Climbing the Alps movie after Impossible Voyage,
Yeah, true.
but not as good.
Another yeah, more vacation shenanigans.
Yeah.
Going on a trip in a rocket ship.
There's no rocket ship in this one, is there?
No.
Nothing that interesting.
No.
This
Not from the Americans.
No, this one did kind of remind me. This is just about an old man having a comedically chaotic vacation through Europe and also Egypt, because I guess that was considered Europe back then.
They were trying to make it that way.
Yeah, they tried. One thing that's kind of stuck out to me with this one is it opens with a lot of like actuality footage, like of the boat leaving, which is just a real boat leaving. And then
yeah, I guess that's true.
And then kind of
probably
turns into a more stylized, like backdrop heavy movie.
Yeah, just using actuality footage that they had on hand, maybe, to incorporate it into almost like stock footage. For their movie. Yeah.
But yeah, this one mostly just kind of feels like a goofy 90s vacation comedy.
And that's the thing is, it's like, we were talking about Edward S. Porter's sloth-like pace with a lot of his films, and I think that I was thinking when I was watching this movie, if this movie were tighter, then it would work really well. For the jokes would really land, right? But like, rather than just like thing happening and then it going wrong, thing happening then it going wrong, every scene is this like drawn out 2-minute long just waste of time.
Speaking of films that are drawn out and wastes of time,
my God, this is not
a real twofer. One directed by Edwin S. Porter, How a French Nobleman Got a Wife Through the New York Herald Personal Columns, which is much too long of a title, and the relatively better Personal, directed by Wallace McCutcheon.
Yeah. I did skim through the Porter one too.
These two movies are nearly shot for shot identical, like to the point where it's kind of hard to tell them apart, but they are different movies.
Yeah, I had no idea that they were like you could skip into the middle of this movie, of one of these movies, and then think that you're in the middle of the other one.
Yeah. Oh, easily.
And so the setup is very, very simple. Here's another early film trope is chases. Right.
Yeah. It's becoming a big one.
Yeah. The setup is, well, I like the opening of Personal because it just shows a personal ad being taken out, or Personal's ad being taken out in the New York Herald.
Personal is the better of the two in almost every respect.
Well, Porter. It says, "Wanted, a young wealthy gentleman would like to meet a young attractive woman. Meet me at Grant's Tomb, Monday at noon."
The most romantic place to meet a lady.
I don't know why, but they're both about somebody meeting ladies at Grant's tomb.
Yeah. Same location both times.
Yeah, and it's almost like the same shot too.
It is. Yeah, it's pretty much the same exact shot.
And then ladies come up and meet the person. The person's waiting around for a second. Ladies come up, and then more and more of them come up because he is a hot commodity.
He's wealthy. Is the implication?
Bunch of
gold diggers surround him and start chasing him.
And they chase him and chase him and chase him.
Well, and the way that this chase is visualized for the movie is that we see a locked off shot of a landscape. We see the rich guy run through, and then one by one we see each of the, I'm gonna say 8 to 12 women cross frame, and then the next one enters and crosses frame, and then the next one enters and crosses frame, and this goes on for a while, and there's a lot of scenes of this.
And it's just that over and over again. It reminds me of
no change.
The Life of an American Fireman, where I was like, okay, I get it. Fire trucks are going to the scene. You know?
8 minutes later, in real time, we see them travel. Personal is a little bit better. The ladies are at least sort of entering screen at the same time. Like, they're kind of crowded together a little bit more, so the shots are a little bit shorter. And then Personal also ends very differently. In How a French Nobleman Got Away Through the New York Herald Personal columns ends with the guy wading out into a river, and one of the women wades out into the river after him, and that's the one that he ends up with. In Personal, one of the women trips and causes a pileup of women behind her, sort of police car style. And then one kind of gets through and confronts the man and pulls a gun on him, and then threatens the rest of the women like, he's mine. And then they end up together.
Yeah, that is better.
Yeah. It's at least a more dramatic, visually interesting ending for the movie.
And Personal, by the way, is shot by Billy Bitzer.
Oh, yeah. Billy Bitzer. Great name.
Who is kind of coming to prominence now at the Biograph Company, and will soon become D.W. Griffith's #1 guy.
Yeah. He's probably like the first like famous like director of photography in terms of like separate from a director. The first guy to be like, I
guess
he's well known for being a camera guy, a cinematographer, as it were.
I suppose. I mean, well, except that Billy Bitzer has directed his own movies.
He has.
And a lot of, like, Edwin S. Porter started as a cinematographer, too.
Yeah.
I think, like, these roles are pretty ill-defined at this
point. They are.
Maybe.
But at least my understanding of Billy Bitzer is that he's famous for, like, creating new camera techniques and for being a cinematographer and camera operator more so than a director. So
fair enough. You got anything else?
There's one more chase movie we can talk about.
Yeah.
Another American, Jack Frawley, directed The Bold Bank Robbery, which is, pretty clearly capitalizing on the popularity of The Great Train Robbery.
Yeah. Finally, Edwin S. Porter gets some of his own medicine.
But
I'm just being extremely mean to him this episode.
No, it's fine. It's fine. He probably deserves it. I think it's unfair to call this like a ripoff though, because it's, other than it being like a robbery chase movie, it's original. Like, it's not really pulling any scenes from it or anything.
It's different.
I thought it was pretty good. It's a cool sort of like, kind of like how The Great Train Robbery is not technically the first Western, but it kind of might as well be. This isn't really technically the first like heist movie, but it kind of might as well be in terms of like how many heist things are in this one. There's like robbing the vault. There's getting away in a car. There's like, I don't know. Like before it was just sort of like little chases, whereas this is like a proper, like people piling into a car after robbing a bank and that sort of thing.
The police giving chase. Yeah. And then it's also got that scene. I don't know, was this from Great Train Robbery or a different one from a year or two ago where they get on a train to escape, but then they're caught at the next station?
That was one of the precursors to Great Train Robbery from the same year, I think.
Well, this one has that.
Yeah.
And it actually shows the process of how that works, which I thought was fun. It was the cops notice that the robbers get onto the train, and so they go into the train station and have the guy send over on the telegraph to the next train station to have some fuzz meet him there at the next place. And then he gets caught. He should have just jumped off. I'm sure those trains are going like 5 miles an hour.
I don't know. They're probably going faster than that. I don't know how fast old trains go. Tweet at us. How fast do old trains travel?
Tweet us at howfastdooldtrainstravel@gmail.com.
Don't email us. Tweet at us at the email address.
Okay. Favorite movie, Glenn?
I want to say Mistletoe Bough.
Okay.
Just because it was the one I was like, I really had the most like reaction to. And the surprise of it. I love watching a movie that's a ghost story without knowing it's a ghost story. It's maybe only the second time that's ever happened to me, but both times it has been a whirlwind.
I hesitate to ask what the other movie is.
Well, we'll get to it.
Okay. Let's see. I mean, maybe actually, despite all of my excoriation, the Ex-Convict might be my favorite.
Oh.
I think that one's interesting.
It is, yeah.
I think it's got a lot going for it.
This is like the first year where our favorite movies haven't been Méliès.
Maybe. Well, I did we do the favorite movies for last year? Great Train Robbery I liked a lot. I think that was
we
the
probably
best of
forgot last year.
Oops.
Whoopsie.
Well, okay. That's it. Hopefully 1905 brings us something better than this. And with that being said, I'll talk to you later, Glenn. See you next week.
All right. Sounds
Good to me. Oh yeah, she give me money when I'm in need. Yeah, she's a kind of friend indeed. I got a woman